officials putting signatures to this memorandum of understanding, I think is a significant step.
Just the fact that they got to the table at
Just
all.
the fact that they got there and they put their signatures. But when looked at within the broad context of ending the political crisis in Zimbabwe, this is just a single step in a journey that is likely to be 1,000 miles. The Memorandum of Understanding, which you ask about, is really a huge laundry list of agenda items.
It talks about sanctions, land, constitution,
yes,
healing, and
yes,
free political activity.
Yes.
That's a lot that they want to negotiate in 2 weeks.
So all the parties were just throwing onto the table things that they think need to be discussed. The key challenge is going to be coming to agreement on those issues and implementing that agreement. And the most difficult challenge is going to be agreeing on who holds the greatest power or the greatest authority in a government of national unity or in a transitional authority.
I noticed in the document that there was no mention of Robert Mugabe as president of Zimbabwe, only as president of his political party. The same thing for Shangarai.
Yes, so President Mugabe has actually stepped down very significantly to come to this particular memorandum of understanding. As you know, over the last years, he had refused flatly to negotiate with the opposition. So now he is there. And at the same time, the opposition insisted that this memorandum of understanding cannot be signed at the presidential palace, which under normal circumstances, that's where an agreement like this is signed. He had to come out to a hotel in Harare, 5 miles from his residence, to sign this, a neutral ground. And he had to agree to sign this document, which does not acknowledge him as the president of Zimbabwe. So he is showing that he's really indeed desperate to have a settlement with the opposition.
So what's the goal? To come up with some sort of power-sharing agreement on the model of what came out of Kenya, for instance, with Odinga and with Kibaki, in which one was president, one was vice president?
Very likely that is what is going to be proposed. We know that President Thabo Mbeki of South Africa has already made suggestions of an arrangement that is similar to what we saw in Kenya, where President Mugabe remains as the ceremonial head of state, and Morgan Tsvangirai of the opposition movement for democratic change comes in as prime minister. So this, I think, is what they seek to achieve with the negotiations. But it's going to be a very difficult process, because they have to talk about those sanctions, they have to talk about land, they have to talk about legitimacy, they have to talk about accountability, transformation. It's going to be a key challenge. So 2 weeks is quite an ambitious time frame, but what I would say is that both parties need this dialogue to work. President Mugabe sees that Zimbabwe is on the brink of a total explosion. Just recently, they introduced $100 billion note, which can only buy you a loaf of bread.
Wow.
So he knows that he risks rebellion even from the most loyal base of his supporters, the police, the army, if the economic collapse is not arrested.
Did President Mbeki, who was the great facilitator, mediator in all of this, and came under some fire from people who thought he was too friendly with President Mugabe, did he have to get up with something today too? Was this also reflecting on him?
He definitely responded to some of the calls that were coming from the opposition and the dissatisfaction that was expressed by the opposition. He invited last Friday the African Union and the United Nations to form a reference group that he will constantly consult with as this dialogue is proceeding. So he's no longer handling the dialogue on his own. You now have the AU and the United Nations involved as well in this dialogue. So
what's the difference between this dialogue and past dialogues? This is not the first time we've seen them look like they're about to have a big conversation.
Yes, the difference now, I think, is the time frame. When you look at the Memorandum of Understanding and the agenda items that are listed there, they are very much the same agenda items that were in the first round of the the dialogue. But this time around, they have a time frame. They're saying within 2 weeks, and they've been saying as quickly as possible they must come to an agreement. So there is some sense of urgency that is associated with this dialogue, but it still remains to be seen, what substantively is going to come out of those negotiations.
Is the urgency economic, or is it political, or is it both?
Well, on President Mugabe's side, it's definitely economic. He sees the country unraveling. So without even an opposition party, he risks a rebellion, he risks an uprising from his own people. Then on the side of the opposition movement for democratic change, it's political in a sense that they really do not have any alternative of breaking the political stalemate that does not involve Mugabe's cooperation to some extent. So for President Mugabe, it's really to rehabilitate his power. He knows that if a spontaneous uprising is going to spring up, sometime down the line, he risks getting wiped out of the scene completely. So this can actually be his way of remaining with something, giving some ground to the opposition, but also remaining with some, power and authority.
We will probably talk again about this in 2 weeks. Briggs Bamba of Africa Action, thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Finally tonight, it's